Welcome back to the longest-running reread of George R. R. Martin's earlier works. Today we'll be talking about Dying the Light, a novella/novel in the Thousand Worlds universe, or we call the George-verse here. As usual, this is Amin, and I'm joined by some Vassals of Kingsgrave who will introduce themselves in reverse alphabetical order.
Alright, there's only three of us. We can do this. I guess the last letter of your last name, so...
Then it's me either way, then, because I end with a Y, and I'm M if it's otherwise, so I think it's me. I'm Michael, Holsey, which ends with a Y, or Mordian on the forums.
I think I'm next. This is Greg, Claudius the Fool on the forums.
This is Duncan, also known as Valkorist on the forums.
And this is Amber Rocks on the forums.
Nice. Okay, so as I said, we'll be talking about Dying the Light, a novel published by George, I think it was 1977. Is that right? First time.
It's definitely a novel, right? I never thought.
Yeah, I think it's long enough to be called a novel. It definitely took me long enough to reread it. So.
Yeah.
And we'll be doing a spoiler-full review as usual, and I guess we'll kind of start off with Lemon Cake scores. I'd give it 3.75 out of 5. I thought it was a pretty good work for George's first lengthy work, and there's a lot of things that kind of maybe are precursors to things that appear in Ice and Fire, like some themes and some characters even. I was a little bit disappointed with the ending, and there were some other weak points, I think, so that's why I give it the more middle score.
I'm gonna say 2.9 Whisper Jewels. I don't want to quite go to 3. Because I was, the first half of it, I was really bored. I felt like it was taking way too long. It just felt like everything else. I meant to look up the names of the short stories that it felt like, and now I've forgotten. All the ones where guy is depressed about woman short stories, right? Like they all feel exactly the same, and it's fine in a short story. Right, like I have no problem with it in a short story. I like it. It's an atmosphere thing. It's a character thing. I just felt like, and I mean, whatever. It was mixed with, some travelogue stuff, exploring the world and things like that. But I don't know. Like the whole feeling of the first half of the book was just. So 2.9. It got better in the second half. I didn't remember it having so much action. By the time I got to the midway point, I was like, because I read it once before. By the time I got to the midway point, I was like, oh, I thought it was over already. I thought this was the end of the book.
I'll give it a little, like 2.75. I really liked the universe because I've, read the stories before and I love the universe, but the story for me it was more than plotting. Like I got the story after a couple chapters. Okay, there's a love triangle. There's, why he's there. That's the mystery part. But once like the whole history of the Kavalar or High Kavalan came into it, like I'm a big fan of show don't tell, and this was a lot of telling, and then you got to see little bits of like it in action, and I couldn't care less about the code duello and slapping people across the face and you choose, I choose. I was like, just tell me the story. And for me, there was no real story except for Dirk wants to get back with Gwen, and there's another, there's a weird love triangle thing going on, or rectangle going on, and the ending, like you said, I was holding off.
Side, so it's a quadrangle, I bet.
Like a trapezoid,
a rhombus, a love rhombus.
That sounds a lot more fun, really.
But I was holding off like till the end. I was like, okay, it's at least we're gonna get some kind of closure. And the ending, like I get him leaving it on like as the swords are coming down, but that was like unforgivable for me. Like you got to have an ending to a novel. Short stories, that's fine. You can't have a 300-page book and not have an ending.
See, I thought it was intended to be like, well, that was the last thing that Dirk ever saw.
Yeah, right? I can see that.
So I didn't hate the ending. I can see why
he was dead at that point. Basically, that's why it ended.
Well, literally, he felt nothing else, right? Like right. that was the last sensation he ever had.
Get that, but again, it's telling a story. I mean, that does make sense because I think the whole novel was from his point of view, right? Except for the prologue, so I guess that would make sense.
Okay, I hate to have to do this, but
you loved it, didn't you, Amber?
Just tell me what happened. So I read it a couple years ago. I reread it 6 months ago or whatever when we were going to do this, and then I didn't read it. I just read kind of a synopsis. So wow, like just real quick.
What happened?
Like what did happen?
Do you
mean
know
just
one of just
What you're talking about?
Okay.
Yeah.
One of the asshole Calivan.
Oh, the hound.
One of the Braiths.
The hound.
Yeah, the guy with the scarred face.
Breton
Yeah.
High Braith.
Yeah.
Lamtree. Whatever.
Yes.
I'm gonna lean on Greg to pronounce everything because he.
Oh, I know how to pronounce everything. I just don't know how to
Exactly.
spell anything.
Yeah, but now we're on audio, so you've got the. You're in the good position. One of the asshole guys had been trying to duel him for 2 weeks or something, right? And at the end, basically, Dirk decided to go commit suicide by allowing him to duel him, and so.
Oh, that's right.
It was basically like they crossed swords, the air was cold, and then the book ended.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
No problem.
The audiobook was great because it ends with that, and then 3 seconds later, this is Ian Glenn. We hope you've enjoyed this unabridged recording. Give a little space there, Ian.
That's right.
Am I next?
Yeah, I think so.
So I'm sort of in two minds with this book. I'm a bit like you guys. I didn't really enjoy reading it at the time necessarily. I found the story a bit sluggish and meandering, especially the first half. I think you can see how much better Martin has gotten at world building over the years. I think unlike A Song of Ice and Fire, where the world building is a seamless extension of the characters' thoughts and motivations, this book, it seems to spend a lot of time just laying out backstory and sociology and legal precedents while the characters wait patiently off to the side. That said, I think it definitely has some really haunting imagery and interesting ideas scattered throughout the book. I never really connected with any of the characters, but I really like the idea of planetary emptiness and decay as a metaphor for failed relationships. And I think it gets much better towards the end as the action heats up. So overall, I would give it 2 out of 5 glowstones.
So I guess I did love it. I don't think it was a really fabulous book. I feel like it was a good first novel. But honestly, even since reading it the first time a couple years ago, there are certain things that have just stuck with me. So I really like the slow, sad, melancholy, boy wants girl, why doesn't girl want boy, but which boy does girl want? And also the whole thing with what happened with Garst at the end, where he doesn't know that he killed Dude. So they're just literally every couple months or something from this book will pop up into my head. I also loved all the names and shit, but I would give it a 3.9, 3.8. I would give it a 3.8. Whisper Jewels.
Yeah, I forgot this was his first novel, so I mean that is. I'll add a little bit, but still, I'm not being harsh. I just didn't, I expect to love everything George writes, and this was just a little downer, a little bit, but still, it was good. I still had fun reading it, and I recommend it.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Amber. There's definitely things from the book that have stuck with me and stuck in my head, and there's tons of stuff from short stories he's written that have stuck in my head. And that was basically I feel like the first half of this book could have been a 15-page short story, and I would have gotten the same stuff out of it. But yeah,
well, it was because we've heard this stuff in some of the stories that we already know, like the Harangans and the war and everything.
Yeah.
Well, it can't be viewed in isolation. That's why it adds a lot to that 1,000 Worlds backstory, and he works on it later on in Night Flyers, that kind of thing. But yeah, the world building is not as good as he can do in Ice and Fire, but it does add that you can't read this thing on its own. It helps that you've read the other stories or the ones that come after. Okay, so what do we want to talk about? I mean, maybe we want to talk about the things that stuck out with us, or the things that can be pulled out that relate to Ice and Fire. We kind of talked. I mean, we talked about Breton. Is basically Proto-Hound, right? At least in the way he's described physically. His face looks just like the Hound's. Mm-hmm. Is there anything else that might have been a precursor in Ice and Fire?
Well, I definitely thought, having both read A Song of Ice and Fire first and watched Game of Thrones before reading this, who's the guy?
Which
Kim
guy?
Dissy, the fat Kim Dissy. Who's this guy?
Auken Ruach.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Kim Dees.
He was totally Varys, right?
I think that's giving him a little too much credit.
Oh,
Well,
I think
in
he's
my
more of a
head.
Littlefinger almost. Like he's like a mix
Yeah.
between Varys and Littlefinger.
Yeah.
Well,
but
you-
that
The
whole
body of
kinda-
Varys and then the mind of Littlefinger.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Because
The
I
intentions of it.
emailed you that because I got a feeling that something was up with Ruark early on, and then Amber's like, oh, he's Varys, so I expected this like master plan, and then like by the end he just hangs himself and there's no closure. I'm like,
I just meant he was chubby.
oh, okay, that's literally all you meant was that
He
he
was,
was
he was a little choppy, a
Well-
little chubby.
And maybe bald. I don't know.
no, he had
His-
flowing
his-
blonde hair. Remember?
No, I don't
He's a-
remember it.
His obsession with Gwen is a little fingery. The way he
Yeah.
tries to conspire to
Mhm.
get her back, and he has this idea that they at one point had sex, and he still pines for her. And once he realizes it's unrequited, he hangs himself. So there's a bit of Littlefinger in there, maybe not as cunning, obviously.
Well, did you think he hanged himself because she was going to tell, or he told Dirk about their night together, and he had never told her about it? I thought he was hanging himself because like the ship was coming, and he knew that he was going to be found out. Like at some point, they were going to tell him the truth that they knew.
Yeah, both. I guess. I guess it was
I think it was,
imminent death, and then maybe the reveal that Gwen didn't love him.
well, yeah,
Also,
but
he's
not that like he was
character-
scared of her finding about that, but yeah, maybe he finally accepted that she didn't love him. / he
Okay.
finally like took responsibility for his actions.
Or-
That it had been in
or
his
just
head.
sort-
That it had been in his head for so long, but once he gave voice to it, he realized how delusional it was.
Yeah, like just a general sort of like, oh, well, I had these plans, they were a long shot, but now they definitely didn't work, so I guess I'm out.
I mean, he did say like make sure that my name like is on the the reports and the
Yeah.
papers, like because I make sure that I'm remembered for this, which I, in hindsight, makes me think he was probably planning on doing that.
Yeah.
But Kim Dissy in general were kind of interesting. The way they were described as a contrast to the Cavaliers, like how they were peaceful, but then they were manipulative and had controlled, like they put the other planets against the Cavaliers in the past.
I like them. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I guess like the Amarelli, who were like the totally peaceful people. So like the Kimdisi are like somewhere between the two of them.
So many postings? Are you just posting images here? I see like the thing going up and
That's
down.
the jacket
Yeah,
covers.
some book covers. I
Yeah.
think, yeah.
Well, Cavalar are kind of like when I first read this book years ago. I felt like they were kind of space Dothraki is the way I described them. I don't know, maybe because of their code or because of
There's an element. It's a violent culture where there are like formalized. I guess I don't know how formalized some Dothraki stuff is. I can't remember.
Yeah.
Song of Ice and Fire anymore. There are ways to have violence within a group, and then like much more lenient ways to have violence outside of a group, I guess. But it's a very violent culture. Women aren't necessarily doing all that well in either one. So there's some similarities. Fewer
Well,
horses.
Gwen is breaking some some ground there. She's like the first female
Wow.
Tain, right?
Sure, but it's not like she's accepted on.
No, I know.
Alpha, right?
No.
Yeah.
Well, also, the practice of like hunting men and flaying them sounded very Bolton to me. Hunting them
imagine
through the
why.
forest with dogs. Yeah.
Yeah. Why? Well, what's the connection? I don't get it.
yeah. Well, the whole
just
the
a hint.
Mockmen was pretty interesting, and just the history of how this culture actually developed and the idea of Mockmen was very fascinating. I think.
Yeah, though there's a lot of good world stuff for sure.
How long exactly? Because I know there was the war and then there was the interregnum. Do we know exactly? Like, is this thousands of years in the future? Is it hundreds? Or do we never get those
Oh,
specific
it's
details?
thousands of years. in the
It's
future,
thousands
that's
for sure, right?
The question is when within that thousands is it? Well, it's after the interregnum. We have that, which was. It says even in the definition it was 50 years in some places, less in others. Never
Okay.
occurred in some places. It's later in George's story. Well, most of them are later though. Most of them are like after the interregnum would be later.
Are any of the stories set during the war?
Well, yeah,
Or
because
it's
like
all
the
like
hero,
after-
for example, when they're about to go to fight the Harangans for the first time, they're gearing up.
Oh,
to
that's
that.
right. Yeah, the guy in like the spacesuit. Yeah.
Yeah,
I like
Okay.
that guy.
All right, it's been a while. Sorry.
yeah. Well,
No.
even that war itself is just interesting. The way it kind of just like died out. They won it, but then the civilization was shattered, and there's like no Harang. Or apparently, there's a Harangans left over on like the one planet, maybe, like the home.
Yeah,
planet.
Yeah. Is that right? I mean, I know they said the servitor races, there were some left, but did they say there are Harangans left?
Somewhere it said that if there's a mind anywhere, it would be on the one planet.
Okay,
So,
yeah.
Well, why did they leave that one alone then? You think they had such a long war?
Well, maybe it was just sort of like, I mean, I don't know. I guess they could scour the planet or something.
Yeah.
I don't know. But.
Or it's like,
Ender's Game, leaving one queen, one egg alive.
But the other species were still around. At least some of them were. Like the high gravity one is still apparently just on its own now.
And you know the Grishka's out there somewhere.
Grishka. Gross.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing with the whole.
The Grishka reminded me of those. If I'm not confused about what the Grishka is that's the one from Song for Laya, right?
Yeah.
The Jello
Okay.
monster.
Yeah. That reminded me of the children. I can't remember what they were called.
Jelly children?
The jelly children of the Wine Dog Ocean, or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Like they're really similar, except that they eventually come out of it and then go into another one. Apparently.
Yeah.
Not this time, though.
Oh, that was
where do we go from here?
They were dumped on there by the remainder of the planet, right? Because it's like the other people on the planet who are not into that cult don't like them, so they just like dump them on there.
Sorry, we're not into that really anymore.
We don't want to live inside the weird drug amphibian fish thing.
You guys can go to the old party planet and hang out until it blows up. That's fine.
Well, there's an interview where George is talking about Dying the Light. He said it initially was called After the Festival because it was the festival world that was built and it was dying out. And he kind of tied it to like where he had grown up in the States himself. That was also facing like economic problems and was not as good as it used to be.
I kept thinking of the Fringe Festival because they kept mentioning the festival and the Fringe, and like it's not. I know it's not set in Scotland, but that's what I kept thinking every time they said the festival.
But it was definitely. I thought of an old World's Fair for sure. The first time
it's like falling
and then
apart
reading
now.
the article you just sent me. It's exactly what he was saying.
Does that seem really silly? The whole idea of terraforming a planet to party for a couple, however long.
Well, they're showing off their abilities, like their wealth, and each planet wanted to show off what they had, including the Darklings were kind of like roped into it, so they just made this whole like nihilistic thing. Darklings of the Darkling plane.
I like that aspect of it because I mean, like there are plenty of things that cities or states or countries or whatever do now, right, to basically sort of showcase wealth and power, and it's.
Well, even the Olympics. Think of the Olympics.
Yeah, exactly, right. That kind of thing. Yeah, exactly. And so, like in an interplanetary culture world, the scale of wealth just changes, right? Like this is how like the degree of power that people can project is just bigger, and so you do wind up. I can believe that something like that would happen, and it's a really cool backdrop.
It made me think of, I don't know if any of you guys have seen the photos of like old American malls and old carnivals and things with all the vines growing over them and trees breaking through the tiles. Just that sense of, I don't know, just like these haunted places that were once so full of life and color and energy, and just, I don't know, just there's something mortal and scary about that, wandering through those places now that they're dead, now that they're so still when they were never meant to be like that.
Yeah, exactly. And like Amin was saying with Olympic buildings and stuff, it's the same kind of like so much glory. And I mean, Olympics have the glory, not the malls so much, but like it's either fun or glory or something. Like there's strong emotions associated with the places, and then it's just dead. It
was about reaching this pinnacle or driving for this high point, and then everything just kind of like it's like a kettle boiling to hot and then just cooling to cold again. And just the description, I really like the descriptions of the Dirk and Gwen wandering through the old cities, and just him imagining the laughter of people and the silence and the suicidal music flowing through the rocks. It made me think, going back to A Song of Ice and Fire, it made me think a lot of Tyrion going through the Rhoyne and seeing all those ruined cities of like the Palace of Love and all that.
Yeah, it's a good parallel.
He can hear the voices of the lovers and the music, and now it's all death and decay. So that idea of just this inevitable mortality. It's very like melancholic and romantic. I like it. I liked all that.
Except he could actually hear the music in this one.
Yeah. Well, the Darklings, just adds to them. You have to bring them in formally into like the podcast references whenever a recording fails. We already have that, right? We actually have our own planet. But you, Duncan, you were saying that kind of like the planet was kind of like a metaphor for that failed relationship. That was kind of interesting. And this relationship in general, I think, as we all said, is kind of like from that phase when George was having maybe problems with his relationships or things that got bad, and he referred to it in his works. You can definitely see that in the works around.
How old would he have been then? Do we know? In 70, whatever? Like 30s or?
No, I think it would be 20s.
29 years old.
Late 20s, yeah.
Born in 48. So 28 or so when he was writing. I can't picture George as a young 28-year-old man.
Go to his website.
Yeah,
you can see. There's a temperature.
Yeah, I think it's those weird pictures where he has that scraggly brown beard mustache thing going.
Well, I have Armageddon Rag, and that's got him like with his DeLorean from like the early 80s. But that's like 1982, I think.
It definitely has that feel of like kind of youth, and the whole, angst, and everything is such a huge, everything is life and death.
Well, he has the different phases. Like some of the ones that was before he had the relationships, it was like, or it failed. Like there was the one we talked about, the second kind of loneliness, and then ones that are like where they had failed, and he's looking back, which is like this one. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I think with Dirk, there's a sense of mourning and a sense of being heartbroken because he seemed to invest so much of his life and his dreams and his youth into this relationship, and it all fell apart. So I guess you can kind of see that with the city, that all of these different races invested so much passion and energy, and it all sort of just fell apart and came to nothing, and it laid bare how nothing was there.
But didn't they all go into it knowing like this would be a temporary thing? And there was almost like they were trying to show off. Like
I think they were blind to the end result. Probably they didn't think about it so much.
Yeah. That confused me as well. Like, how long did the festival actually last? Because they built full cities.
I think it was a couple hundred years.
Right.
But I thought they knew from the beginning that it would eventually pass out.
Like 50 years or something like that.
Yeah, I don't think it was a couple hundred. I think
50 years for the path to go through there, so maybe like 30 years of prime there. Because maybe it fits relationships. Sometimes you go in a relationship and you blind yourself that has no future. You're just trying to enjoy that time.
And to some extent, I mean, like nothing has. I mean, it's all temporary, right? Like you're gonna die,
No.
Jeez, there's a group of nihilists on this podcast.
I mean,
you're a darkling, aren't you? Oh, speaking of which, Michael's got to head out in a few minutes, just so you know.
Yeah.
His time here is temporary.
Yeah. That's all I was saying. So, like, it's a 50-year or 30-year or whatever festival, right? And they do know that it's temporary, but like. I mean, you're going to be lucky to get 50 years out of even a good relationship that you get into when you're in your 20s, right? I mean,
So it's like, well, then don't be like, why don't even try, right? That's kind of
sure, yeah. Built the festival world, right? Yeah. But like, somebody's going to die, man.
Yeah, and I guess that's the inevitable fate for all the characters. We're all going to die. So the question is, why do anything? Why? It's like an existential kind of question. Why try at all? Why commit to anything? Why invest in anything if you're going to die? And that's the question, I guess, for the festival cities. Why go to all this trouble? And I guess that's one of the themes that keeps coming up. You have to have a code. You have to believe in something beyond your kind of mortal flesh. There has to be a sort of transcendent ideal that you cling to.
Yeah, and one thing I think it's going back to Duncan or somebody was talking about how Dirk was obsessed with what's her name?
Gwen Delvano.
Ginny. Ginny as a how there was a good long chunk of time. Does anybody have a solid number on how long between Dirk and Ginny breaking up and this book starting?
7 years.
7 years, right?
Yeah. Okay, it's just 7. Okay. How obsessed do you guys think he was with Gwen prior to receiving the Whisper Jewel, right? Like if we had seen like a week in the life of Dirk before, like how often was he thinking about it?
I don't think he was that much, no.
I think he was just sort of generally having like an existential crisis and getting a little suicidal, right? And then he got the Whisper Jewel. It reminded him... He was sort of like, oh, this was a time in my life, right? Like I can have feelings, and then
Yeah,
So I don't think that it was so much about him necessarily being like obsessed with her, but it was definitely about like an existential despair and decay. So.
I think that makes sense. Like he was unhappy with his current life, so the reminder of this past life when he had so much more to live for, sort of stuck in.
And the Whistle Drill is a lot more effective than like looking at an old video. Like you actually get the full feelings of what it was back then.
Yeah.
Very insidious.
It was sent by Rourke. He was the one who sent it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What's the look at the cover? Like the different covers. The one where like Gwen is tying somebody up. Is that supposed to be Rourke or is that somebody else?
I think it has to be. I don't remember her tying anybody else.
Oh no, I thought that was Dirk. That's
Does she tie
I assume
Dirk?
that's no. She's like untying him. It's when they
that what they were
in front of
maybe?
the.
Yeah.
He had long gray
That's
hair.
either.
That's got to be
Remember him having gray
Darcy.
hair? Yeah, I assume that was Gentini Riv Wolf High and Jade Vickery, but it might have been.
Yeah, because
I think we should just take 15 minutes and Greg should read all or should say all the names of the characters.
I think it's a lot more amusing if the Cavaliers have a British accent. That would be funny.
Funny, he gave in the audiobook he gave everyone different British accents. The only accent he did for the Americans was the voice of the city of Challenge, where he went into this like, "How may I serve you?"
Oh, God.
That sounded like West Country or something. Cider.
It's a fake American accent that doesn't exist.
But I thought, okay, the Cavaliers had to do this to get through that very difficult time, but their culture is completely outdated, and all the better that it's dying out, is my opinion on it.
I mean, sure, yeah. I mean, I think the Iron Jades and there was one of the houses had some kind of cultural alliance with them, I think, right? But are sort of, beginning to drag them into the future, I think.
Yeah, I think there's like 4 different houses, but there used to be others that were destroyed.
There seemed like there are, like maybe 4 or 5 big ones right now, right?
Yeah.
It's like, well, whatever. I'm not going to try to name.
Yeah, but the houses was kind of like, again, Ice and Fire precursor, like the way they were described and had the banners and stuff.
Sure. Yeah, the sigils and everything. Yeah. Oh, and that was the most predictable part of the whole book was when he was running and the Wraith saved him. Like I called that from the second. I was like, he's going to get saved by Wraith because he's officially one of them now. So, but,
Banshee, right?
Or Banshee, sorry, not Wraith.
Well, that's the Wraiths were the.
Well, what did you think about like when he ran away from the Code Duolo fight in the first place? Like it was almost like, well, duh. Like you really expect him to fight in this thing? I mean, he shouldn't have accepted in the first place. It was his mistake. He should have done anything to get out of it.
Yeah, I don't think he knew then how serious it was, or because like he was scoffing at them when they were like explaining it a little bit, but then he's like, I can just shoot over their heads, or he's like, well, that's not going to work.
It always kind of reminded me of some ugly American going wherever and just like kind of shitting on people's
murder rituals. Yeah, we're like that, aren't we?
Yeah,
we're so dismissive of other people's murder rituals.
Exactly.
They're just rituals that happen to include murder.
No. I mean, I take your point, Amber, and I think to some extent George was saying that, but at this time, like I was rolling my eyes a little bit because it is a thing. Like, listen, I don't know how much we have to respect this.
Yeah, limited respect when they're hunting mockmen, and like they're rightfully worried that the other planets will hear about it because they're not going to be happy about it. They're going to punish them for it.
Well, that I kept going is like, what does the rest of the unit or whoever's policing the universe in this world, like they're just letting these crazy space barbarians murder people,
but
just because this place is almost
planet. There's no law there, right? No one's.
No, I know, but like I would assume the IMRLE whatever would like take issue at the High Council of whatever planet meeting they have every month to be like, hey, these guys shouldn't be killing us. But it's like, I don't know. There was like 400 people still living in that city, and there's like 100. It's like you're on vacation in a hotel, and then some barbarian shows up and kills you. It's like, it's cool.
I guess maybe because it's abandoned, it's sort of, like a slum or whatever, where like, like the cops are not like super interested in investigating like murders that happen there or something. I don't know. I also don't know necessarily. Yeah, I mean, it seemed like the larger governments that had built the festival city were not super interested in what happened there. But I thought that too, right? Like I could accept like, okay, well, there's not going to, there's not really any law currently in place, right? There are no cops. But I was thinking that too, that it's just like somebody's going to, It's going to at least be like some kind of diplomatic protest filed, right?
If word gets out, it probably there'll be some survivors, then this is already... And then that's why they kind of broke off and made their own house, too. Kind of like broke off even from Kevlar society.
Yeah, because that's true. And so if they're not planning on going back to Kalavar, which is also incredibly short-sighted and dumb, but whatever. Yeah. But if they're not planning on going back to Kalavar, then it really does become a thing where like somebody has to send like a platoon of Marines to scout to hunt for these criminals on this planet. Yeah. Like that's a lot. It's like a heavy resource investment to try to.
That's right, but the funny thing is, Breton basically killed off everybody else, right?
He helped out a lot.
He helped clean out the planet in terms of the other Cavalars.
But it's sort of like a self-destructive people where they think everyone who's not them is the enemy, and once they've killed all of those people, they start turning on each other and cannibalizing each other. So it's just this sort of fundamentalism turned in on itself. It can't adapt to the new world. Its codes are too strict. They're too regressive, and they just devour each other.
I always like Duncan's analysis because I say like that's stupid, and he drops big words.
Yeah, I was just thinking the same thing.
It's funny when they found out the previous person who founded the colony was a woman, and it just didn't fit like their society at all. Like that's the whole Jantony was threading all that with his thesis.
Yeah. And that's one thing, right? I mean, like, I think that, absolutely there's going to be conflict, same type of conflict going on back on Kalavar. But I think it's sort of like at its highest pitch here, right? Because these are like the people on the festival world on Warlorn are like it's a mix of the very most regressive and like the very most progressive, right? Like Jan is there essentially just because these lunatic regressives are here murdering people, right? Like he's trying to keep them from murdering people.
That's right.
Yeah. So like the conflict, I think, is sort of like at its highest pitch here on Warlorn. I think that it's at least somewhat more subtle and restrained on Kalavar itself.
But Jan's like faction is winning slowly in Kalavar. Like you think 100 or 200 years in the future.
Yeah, I think so.
That's interesting that two of you are going with Jan. Yeah. I went with Jan. His name was Anthony, but that's interesting.
They said Jan on the... Oh, that's true. Yeah,
it's Jantony, yeah.
I don't know.
I keep calling him Jan, like the...
You're on Avalon. You're on Avalon.
Sorry, we're on Avalon.
That's where he switched to Jan, right? Instead of...
He was here. That was interesting, too, that he was there. Garth wasn't with him, though, right? He went there alone, and then Gwen got together with him, and then got roped into this whole like society where it's like really shitty for her.
I want to hear the conversation, or I would hope multiple conversations, where... thanks a lot. Where Jan...
It's just Jan.
Vickery? It's called Vickery.
Yeah, right. No, I'm going to stick with Jan.
Go ahead.
Thanks. Where Jan was explaining to Gwen, like, this is exactly what a Betherin is. Yeah. And she was like, yeah, that sounds fine. And he was like, no, this is what it is. And she's like, yeah, that's cool. You have a boyfriend back home who also has to that. Okay. Yeah, no, that sounds great. And he's like, no, listen, also if I die. And she's like, no, that's that's fine. No problem.
Well, do you think that he told her the full story though, right?
But he's an honorable guy, right? Like, the only way I think he doesn't tell her the full story is if he, like, sort of is like, well, she understands. She doesn't. This is, we all understand what's happening. I don't understand how that conversation could have possibly gone, like, in any way where she's like, all right, yeah.
She seems surprised about Garth,
he'd already had her convinced that he was such a progressive dude that regardless of what the rules are, that he was going to treat her differently.
He didn't explain what was going on. Like it really is ultimately a victory, especially the fact that when he dies, like she's screwed over.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, just like if I trip and fall, like you've got a real problem, like a bad one. Like I don't understand how she could have. But
if she wanted to leave, couldn't she just have left at some point? Why did she need like? Could you just have got on a space thing and gone to Avalon? And what are they going to do? Like, come and try to drag her out of Avalon?
I guess that's a good. Well, but it's all about like whether or not like if he dies suddenly, right?
Yeah.
Then she has a real problem. as long as she has some warning, then yeah, I think because again, I think Calavar itself is not that bad, right? Like the people leave Calavar, and the only person's permission I think she would need to leave is Jan's. So like, sure, I think she could have walked away as long as she was on, a planet with spaceships and stuff. And as long as he was alive, it's just like, you've really, I mean, literally almost shackled yourself to Jan, right? Like, if something happens to Jan, like,
well, she was already considering leaving him while he was like actually leaving him, right? But then I guess did she need Dirk to help push that, or she was going to, or Rourke was suspecting that? Like,
see, I never thought she actually chose to leave him, because the whole thing with Dirk is that she just wanted to protect Dirk.
Yeah,
she was
it
never
was all a
actually
manipulation orchestrated by Rourke. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah,
how to spell it.
I got a name.
Truth.
It seemed to be that she also had eventually, by that point, somewhat worked it out with Garth. I don't know if that.
Yeah, I mean, like their relationship was certainly could be acrimonious, but it seemed like that the sex seemed okay. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
Their greatest concern was what's coming after at that point, I think.
Yeah.
I hate to keep doing this, but is there an R in gas? Is it gas? I thought it was gas, like G-A-S-S.
No, it's G-A-R.
What does he say, gas?
It was gas Janicek is what he said. Or Gaz Janicek.
Giant.
There's an R there.
Oh, man.
Garcy.
You're missing the letter, so then it's...
I know. I got to add some silent P's and T's to my name now.
So who was it? Ian Glenn?
Yeah. He was the narrator.
Nice.
Well, the audiobook was great. No complaints about that.
Okay, were there any other points or things that caught people's attention? I'll look at my notes here.
Well, just the way it went down from... I mean, I had little problems, but I just hated the fact that when after you found out that Gas or Garth was killed, Jan killed him.
Yeah.
I thought that was rushed because, like, you were with him for, like, 3 chapters. They met up, they shared their sky scoots, and they were on the hunt together. And then over the course of a page, he's dead, and Anthony's there.
And then he finally made the right decision, too. He finally decided to side with his partner, and then he dies, like, right after.
Well, and that compounds how frustrating it is that they never confronted Rourke about it, because it's all because of him and his lies going between everybody. But I hated the fact that they never actually told Jan. So, I mean, now you think she's going to tell him now that, assuming Dirk is dead, or
she couldn't.
She's going to bury that and sit on that for 30 years.
Yeah.
Well, which is what I really thought made it that much more tragic. Of course, I mean, obviously that's the point, but if you kind of play it out how she has to live with that for however long or whatever, and just how much that would, destroy John, whatever his name is, Jantony. And that, I don't know, I think that's one of the things I always think of when I think random thoughts about this book is like, it's just so awful. Like, because sometimes the truth is hard, and sometimes it would be so much easier, but it's not necessarily the right thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm looking at notes. It looks like the Darklings don't use computers very much. They have very little of that technology. That's good to know.
Yeah, but they're the ones that still use like a weather, terraforming stuff, right? Because they keep their planet at a cool 68.
But nobody's weather terraformer has ever failed and lost a podcast. So it still fits.
What do you think happened? At the end of this? I mean, they have to basically leave and go back to Avalon. I think, right? Like what happens after the end of the novel?
Oh, to Gwen and Jan.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm assuming Dirk is dead, but does Bragan de Bartherbrug does the Hound have a problem with Jan or not? I don't
think so anymore, unless Jan takes it as a affront to his Carrarial that he killed him.
Oh, no, I think Jan's probably cool if Dirk entered the square willingly or whatever. But I'm saying does the Hound have a problem with Jan? I know he swore not to hurt Gwen, right? He promised the Rourke that, but I sort of had the impression. I mean, it didn't sound like the Hound was just hunting Dirk, right? I mean, it was.
No, I didn't think he was. I thought because Jan was the one who killed
Yeah.
his Tane, right? Charles.
Exactly. Yeah. So I mean, I feel like Gwen and Jan are still under threat of ambush from him at the airport, right?
Yeah. But I
Can they
think Jan-
ambush him though? I mean, it's not honorable, right? Don't they have to?
No, he can now. Jan's a.
Oh, that's right.
That's right. Yeah, he's a monk man.
Shit.
Does he even know about that? I guess he would have been told by someone. Like, well, he was.
Well, he told Dirk that he knew he doesn't. He called him like Oathbreaker or Bondbreaker, Outbonder,
Yeah,
or something
yeah.
like that.
But you think like the fact that Dirk actually faced him in the end and got killed, like, do you think that stands for something? Like
I think it stands for something.
Yeah.
But I mean, his 10 is still. Is that what they said, Greg? By the way, is it 10 or Tane?
Tane. I thought it was like a Thane, but it's like a Tane.
Okay, Tane.
Teyn.
Yeah, but
Tane
like,
is
isn't
sort
like
of,
Tane is an old like Celtic term for like
Right.
brother,
Yeah,
or like
exactly.
lord kind of blood brother type thing.
Yeah. So I thought I certainly had the impression like he probably wanted to kill Jan too, and so I think he's got.
who's to say that he can do it though?
He's-
I mean,
Yeah,
I think he's got pretty decent odds, right? I mean, I'm not saying it's a guarantee, it's a mortal lock or anything.
I think it's
but
a 50-50 at best.
Sure.
yeah. I thought Jan was pretty
Well,
confident
I
that he
think-
would beat him if they had the duel originally.
If they had the duel, then yeah, Jan was pretty confident. But I mean, Dirk mentioned, right? Jan is falling apart psychologically a little bit. Also, what's his face is supposed to be, right, like a good hunter. The Hound is supposed to be a good hunter, right? And he's going to try to attack them from ambush, right? Like he's not scared of them, they're scared of him, right? Like they're holed up and hiding and on guard all the time and like stressing out and stuff like that. But like the Hound is just, like he's just he's stalking them, right? He's waiting for the kill. So I don't know if I do think it's 50-50. I think I would put the odds higher on his side than their side.
I did really like meeting the other, the Kevlar, like the poet at the end, the old guy.
Yeah.
And
That was
that did
cool. I like that.
show like the other side of the society, that they're not
Yeah.
all just these brusque barbarians. Like there's a poet, and he's talking about melancholy he calls Dirk a ghost. He's like, oh, you must be a ghost. And at one point, he even makes like a Charles Dickens Christmas Carol reference. He says, "I'm here haunting you for
chain.
lack of a good chain to rattle,"
Yeah.
which I loved. But I'm like, in 6,000 years, are we going to still be making, like Stephen King references? But I did really like that, and his character I thought was a nice touch, especially like right at the end before the actual end.
Yeah.
He also has a good line about his poetry will die once the language of the Kevlar die, which I thought was
Yeah.
nice. Like it reminded me of the music going through the rocks. Like it's music without instrument. It's like a form without a source, or that idea of meaning doesn't exist unless you have something like a form to attach it to. I thought it was really like very existential and there's no inherent meaning to anything unless we imbue it with meaning.
Right.
Well, you give that's the whole theme. The other theme is, you give something a name, then you've created a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And when you
Yeah.
can't say the name anymore, it's not there anymore.
And I thought
Okay,
that
guys,
tied nicely.
I gotta
sorry.
bail. It was good.
Oh,
talking
you have to
you.
give us your name before you
Oh
leave.
shit! I didn't make a name, Greg. I'm sorry.
Get it to us in post.
All right, I'll email it. I'll try to email it to you. I'll have to look. I need to look up the rules too because I forgot what they are.
It's a first name,
Okay.
noun, animal, and then two correct, and then two precious gems, and the last name. So,
Street you grew up on.
Email me the
First
form,
dog.
and then I'll email
Okay.
a name back to you.
Is
it was-
Riv an animal?
no,
sorry.
Riv is just a noun. I don't know what that is, but I did whatever. We'll
it
get
was
to the
good to talk
details.
to you guys. I look forward to the
Bye,
rest of the
Michael.
podcast.
See ya.
I'm gonna leave my recorder up, so just in case.
Okay.
Talk to you guys later. Bye.
So yeah. I thought the idea of like imprinting meaning on someone, I thought that tied quite well in with what Gwen goes through, where she keeps describing as she could never fit the image that Dirk had created for her. He keeps calling her Jenny, but that was not who she wanted to be. And then I guess she sort of pivots into Jan's life, where he's almost got this role etched out for her, and she has to embody this role, even though she never really feels comfortable in it. So she's kind of bouncing back and forth between these two men who want to possess her and control her and fit her into this little idea of, what complements their own vision of who they are. But she can never really be herself. And I don't think, even through the text, she never really felt like a a fully realized character to me. She was always in relation to these two men, how she served their purposes or their messed up psyches.
Yeah, I know we probably would have got more of that if any of it was from her point of view, but it just never was.
Mm-hmm.
How did they spell her name? Was it Varno? Varno? Or was it like Gwendol Varno, one word?
Oh, Delvano. Delvano.
Oh, Vano. He added an R when there was no R. I had this whole comparison to make to Dr. Varno from The Time Travelers, a crappy movie from Mystery Science Theater 3000, which I assumed George watched and then put in here, but I guess not.
Damn it. By the way, in my head, I didn't think about it too much, what happened after the end. But really deep down, I just thought maybe Dude didn't kill him.
That means that Dirk killed him, or you think they ended like...
Or just gave him a
that
scar,
they did the thing where, you just have to shoot, right? Or whatever.
I don't think that guy was in the, he had been waiting for this for a long, since he killed his buddy.
I think he got laid and just got over it. That's what I think.
Yeah, I think it's possible he respected the fact that that Dirk stood his ground, because originally he ran, which enraged him because it was cowardice. But the fact that even though he was way outmatched, the fact that he stood and took his medicine, he might have said, "All right, I'll give you a scar," because it seemed like Breton had become disenfranchised possibly with the rest of the Cavalan, because
he doesn't believe
the
Mothman stuff, right? Didn't he say?
Yeah, he said he never did. Yeah. And plus, he killed half of his own brothers in the right before that.
I was thinking about what the Mockman idea might mean, and it seems to be something about you're like a skin changer, or you look like a man but you have no inherent substance, you have no code. And I feel like that's what maybe he viewed the other Cavalan as being, that they'd forgotten who they were, and they were just twisting their code to suit their own violent desires and self-destructive desires. So he hunted them as he would Mockman, whereas he may have respected Dirk for actually having some guts and standing his ground. Maybe there's some substance or some code that he saw in Dirk that maybe would have stayed his hand from killing him.
Maybe he made Dirk his disdain.
Aww.
But wasn't he told, like, when the guy Hussein was dying, that he promised to do that? I think he's like because they had broken from the home planet. Is that why he started hunting the rest of them? I remember why he started going after the rest. He made the promise, right?
Well, like Gas turned them against each other when they were hunting Jan. That was part of his plan. I forget what he did specifically to do that, but part of his idea was like to get them fighting each other. So
but he didn't get Breton to fight each other. Breton started going because he promised to his dying Tain.
Yeah, and one of his guys, I think, wanted to like kill Gwen, and he's like, "No, we have to abide by the code," and then he killed them, and then it spiraled out of control.
I was reading a couple of reviews on the internet, and a few people brought up there's allusions to the Arthurian legend, the idea that the Guinevere characters being this sort of love triangle between these two men and Lady Guinevere, and Avalon. That's a place it's like an island in Arthurian legend.
Well, that's where Arthur goes at the end.
Yeah, it's this sort of plentiful island or bursting with
Jan is King Arthur. Well, I mean, Dirk even mentions Gwen and Lancelot at several points. So I guess he's Lancelot, she's Guinevere, and Jan is King Arthur.
And I guess if I don't know, the festival city is sort of this impossible utopian kingdom that ultimately fails, sort of like Camelot. Like everyone imbued all this glory and prestige into it, but it was ultimately doomed and just will end up being this desolate wasteland in the end, forgotten.
I like it.
Well put. So is anyone here going to challenge anyone to a duel?
It was funny how that Vickery was keeping people under control, even though he was progressing himself because of his own dueling skills. People were scared to face him earlier in the book.
Mm-hmm.
I was trying to think of a comparison in A Song of Ice and Fire, if there's any characters like that sort of trying to reform their people or something. I couldn't think of any. I mean, at first, he struck me a bit like Rhaegar Targaryen, this kind of mythical, dour, sullen, heroic person. But yeah, beyond that, I couldn't think of any comparisons.
Well, they have that, like, they keep swearing, by ice or by fire and iron, I think they say. And there's, that I always think of, I swear by ice, I swear by fire, Song of Ice and Fire. So it's a little, but that's kind of obvious.
Yeah, attaching your self-worth to these kind of elemental ideas that there's there's these eternal virtues or something that you can try and claim, even though you're going to die ultimately. You can try and.
What did the glowstones?
something
The glowstones have any effect other than just glowing up, or were they like a little bit like whisper jewels, or they weren't? That's probably confusing.
I thought they were just.
Sorry, one sec. I'm on the wrong screen.
Amber's being hunted.
Okay.
She's a mockman. You're a
Those are
mockman.
some fierce Cavalar hounds at your house. Careful. I thought the glowstones were just symbolic, but I don't know if they had any actual purpose.
Just looking to see if I have anything else highlighted on her.
I really like Gas. He was probably my favorite character because even early on, like you knew he had a connection with Gwen, just the way they were like joking with each other. But as it went on, like you realize he was actually pretty important, and I just like the scene where like Dirk basically tells him to get up and get back on his feet and help us, solve this problem, so he doesn't just lie around drunk. But I didn't expect him to die. Or especially like that, because I thought he wouldn't be killed by Jan.
What did you think of his decision, Dirk's decision, not to tell Jan that Gus had always been on his side? Was that the right thing to do?
I think so. I think just because it would have broken him at that point.
Yeah, I think so.
It's hard to say. I mean, because then you have to make a judgment call about, is the truth always the right thing? Because, I mean, it probably would have broken him. I personally think it's probably the right thing to do. But then at the same time, it's like, shouldn't he be allowed to, I don't know, maybe he wouldn't have been broken. Maybe he should have been allowed to make that decision. Yeah. I don't know.
I mean, it sort of robs Gus of his honor, I guess, that he'll always be thought of as this traitor and that he never really loved Jan when he really did. But at the same time, maybe he loved Jan so much that he would have supported that decision not to have Jan's mind destroyed like that.
That's right.
What also bothered me about that whole way that played out was the way that they decide to not tell him. There's nothing spoken. She just looks at him, and through an eye glance, she understands. Oh, let's not tell him because it'll break him. Like that seemed unbelievable for me. They did. That's why I was confused as the reader because like they didn't talk about it. They just did it. I was like, what? Did I miss something? Or they just? And then I realized, then he had to tell us it would break him.
Yeah.
Didn't like that.
So sad.
Can we read a Happy George story? Are there any Happy George stories?
There's a couple of points that I noted in the notes. There was these two guys that were saying that they would have been. He's like, maybe we would have been Tain and Tain if we felt differently about women. And I was like, what does he mean? Is he progressive? Is he just gay and doesn't want to be in a relationship? Like, that was kind of interesting.
I would imagine that homosexual relationships are frowned upon on High Cavalan. I don't know why I get that vibe.
But why would that be when it's like they basically almost have that, like with Tain and Tain? Like, aren't they all?
I really don't think so. I think it's more of like a bond, like a brother bond.
I don't know.
Thing.
I mean, that's
I thought it was implicitly homosexual, like the kind of the Spartan, the ancient Greeks, that Spartan idea of brotherly.
So in that sense, that
sacred band.
I
didn't get that.
Yeah, no, I think it was because they were so low on women too, right? Initially, and then so when he's saying he felt different about women, he meant he didn't want to bring women into their relationship. Okay. That wouldn't have worked for him. So that's why
we don't need that. All right.
That was the reference I read there. Now let's see. There's the Banshee. What do I have the Banshee referred to here?
Well, that was so obvious. I mean, as allegory with the Banshee saving them and then being destroyed by little things. So like, the Banshee
swarmed
on its own, but then it gets swarmed by little things, which are going to destroy their culture anyway.
Or just like the great thing, like can be taken down by that analogy is made in Ice and Fire as well. Somewhere it's like it can
don't take tree spooks as your pets.
No, I mean there's like a dragon could be taken down by like 1,000 rats. Some sort of reference like that is made somewhere in Ice and Fire. I remember that's why I highlighted it.
But what kind of a defense mechanism does this creature have where it just, it has to like suck up its prey and just lie flat on the ground and digest it? That doesn't, maybe in a pack that works, but on its own,
it didn't have a problem on that planet, maybe. There was nothing.
Yeah. Didn't account for the tree spooks.
The tree spooks were from Disney World, weren't they? That was kind of interesting.
If they were, then that's even more foreshadowing because it's the Kimbisi that are going to come out on top by getting all these others to fight each other.
Yeah. The Wolfmen seemed interesting. Yeah. Then there's a thing about the code. It's like every man should have a code. And then here's the colors, like the sigils here. Let's see. A green banshee on a field of black for iron jade. Shanagate silver hunting fat on yellow. Cross swords against crimson for red steel. And for Braith, a white wolf on purple. Cool.
And somebody named Stark was the editor of the audiobook. Just mentioning that. But it was Janet. It was Janet Stark. I don't remember her from the books.
Yeah. Okay, the last thing I was going to mention was there was a great war in the past. They're talking about history where like this one house could use its women in the war as well, and then they had one, and that was kind of interesting. I think Jan was in favor of them or something. I can't remember. He liked doomed heroes, but they ended up losing because they lost so many women. They couldn't like have enough kids.
Isn't that where he took one of his names was actually from a female, but he had to like hide it and mix it up with another name? Isn't that what happened?
I don't know if it was from female or from the leader that had done that to have the women fight along the men. But then they lost because they won the battle, but then they just couldn't keep up.
Yeah.
In terms of like they were so low on women after that. Well, that's the one thing we mentioned. Like one of the things that Jan got out of the relationship was getting. When he married, he kind of got up in rank, right? Because he's like he brought a woman from outside the clan. That was to his advantage, and then he would lose that if she left.
Is that better to have someone from the outside? I can't remember.
Not necessarily out of clan, just outside of the clan. It was equivalent. Like it made
of the gotcha.
Of your particular house or whatever. Like that's
out of the vicary.
Yeah.
I gotcha.
The Iron Jades.
Okay, well, that's all I have. Is that everyone has in there?
Well, if no one else has a Kavalar name, I'm at least going to say mine.
Say
so did
name,
you guys
yeah.
come up with them or no? I'm Gregory
right.
Book, Chinchilla, High, Peridot, Sardonyx, Claudia Ulysses. And if you want to make your own Kavalar name, I think it's just your first name and then a noun and then an animal and then a direction like high, medium, or low, and then your birthstone and then 2 names from history that you mix together. So have fun with that, folks.
Nice.
I like it.
Put that in your signature now. That's your name.
I'll
Put
change
that
my
recipe
name
in the thread because I forget already.
Okay, well, thanks for joining us, everyone. That was fun. And we're on bastardskingsgrave.wordpress.com or via podcastfire.com. And we'll be continuing our rereads of George's earlier works. Not sure what we'll do next. Probably, hopefully, a couple more short stories we might have missed out first time around. Maybe Havel and Tough. I mean, we never actually covered it over here.
Yeah, I was looking at all the stories that are set in this, and aside from Tough Voyaging, it's just Night Flyers and the Way of the Crossing Dragon, right?
Well, we've done Night Flyers.
Oh, I didn't do Night Flyers.
I know, but
And
you missed out.
Sorry.
We did Sand Kings. I don't know
Yeah,
if
we
you
did.
were there for
That was the beginning. That was the first one, wasn't it?
First one.
But I mean, wasn't that the same? Was that the same?
Yeah. No, I mean ones that we hadn't covered. I meant, yeah, like I included
gotcha.
Sand Kings and Song for Laia, but we already done those.
Gotcha.
But I was looking at Tough Voyaging in the bookstore, and it's like 500 pages. I didn't know it was that long. But
it's a bunch of
one
short stories that we've put together. That's why it's that long. But it really is independent short stories.
It's called a fix-up novel. That's the technical term.
We never did the what was the flying one that he did with the chick, with the Tuttle chick?
Oh,
Windhaven. Yeah, we haven't done that either. I've read it before. Yeah, that's
I
something.
kind of like that book.
Yeah.
There's my review.
I've been meaning to read Fever Dream. That's a good horror book.
I've started it 3 times, but I haven't. I couldn't get into it.
Oh,
I have a comment.
really liked it.
You got to keep reading, man.
I know.
I think that was the first non-Ice and Fire book of his that I read. Good shit.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's it then. See you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.